Hablando Claro con María Barquin. Ha sido uno de los mayores honores en mi trayectoria profesional sentarme con Paul Chávez y Manuel Bernal. No solo a conversar, pero en los mismos lugares que moldearon sus corazones, sus mentes y su liderazgo. Desde Delano hasta Boyle Heights, regresamos a sus raíces, lugares llenos de recuerdos, momentos y significado. Estos dos hombres han sido mentores para mí, guías cuya confianza valoro profundamente. Me enorgullece compartir ahora una parte de sus historias con ustedes y espero que sientan su pasión, su humildad y su humanidad tan profundamente como yo la sentí. Y justo después de estas historias, les presentaremos en vivo, aquí mismo en este escenario, para sentir la adrenalina de esa conexión humana juntos como una sola organización.
We're at the National Chavez Center. We're at the Memorial Garden, and it's a place where my mother and my father laid to rest. And so we wanted to make sure that this place captured the spirit and some of the history of their life and their work. And so, you know, we worked very hard with the architecture and even with the plantings. For example, the wisteria here. You know, these vines can live to 100 years.
Wow.
But the thing that we like about it is that when they flower, the flowers droop and they look like bunches of grapes. That talks about the beginning of the farm worker movement. So, you know, it's not only is it beautiful, but it's got that kind of significance. And so there's a lot of, there was a lot of thinking and meaning behind the design and the materials used here.
How many times a week do you come and enjoy this beautiful area?
You know, it depends, right? You know, normally it's giving tours and visiting people and stuff like that. But there's times that I'll come in the evenings when it's quieter and just to sit there and kind of talk to my mom and dad.
How do you feel every time you visit the place where your parents rest in peace?
Well, you know, to me, it gives me a real sense of tranquility, of peacefulness, you know, to come here and be around them. And, you know, and it's a great backdrop to sit there and to think about whatever you have going on. And well, as I get older, I think maybe coming here, I'm looking for los consejos of my father and my mom.
Y los regaños.
Y los regaños, yeah.
Paul, there is a saying that goes, behind a great man, there is a great woman. Tell us about your mom's legacy within the movement and within your family.
I remember when my mom passed away, people came from all over to comfort us and, you know, and to be with us. And I heard a lot, you know, behind every great man is a great woman, right? And all I could think of is that they didn't really know my mom. You see, my mom was a strong woman. You know, she shared the same background as my dad. She grew up in a farm worker family. She lived in a converted horse barn. She dropped out of school in the 8th grade. And you know, along with my father, they made a decision to give up the most comfortable life they ever had to begin to organize the farm worker movement. And so it took a lot of strength and a lot of courage to do that. So, you know, in thinking about those comments of, you know, of compassion that people were giving us, right? All I could think of is they didn't know my mom because, see, my mom was never behind my dad. She was at his side, and sometimes she was out in front. You know, sometimes people can look at the work in the times and say, oh, it doesn't apply. But if you look beyond that, if you look at those values and those things that gave them strength, it applies now more than ever. You know, a couple of lessons that I learned from my father. One was having faith in people. He really believed that, like, the poorest of the nation's poor could take on one of the biggest and most powerful industries and beat them. He believed that farm workers could take on the powerful growers. That's a big part of his legacy. And I think that that's something that in the foundation that we've done is, you know, we look at people and we challenge them to do more. And when there's openings, we want to make sure that we give those opportunities to people inside the organization. I remember my dad pushed me all the time. You can do this, mijo. And I was like, oh no, Dad. And you know, and I realize now that I didn't have the confidence in myself, but he had confidence in me that I could do it. I remember when he asked me to run the foundation, you know, I didn't know anything about affordable housing or radio or running a nonprofit, but he was convinced that I could do it. But I remember him saying, but I want you to make me a promise. I said, okay. He says, listen, you're going to be in a position where you're going to get to decide who does what. He says, you know, because of the life you've been born into, you've been fortunate that you've had opportunities that other people would have never had. Promise me that when it comes time to make those decisions about who gets to do what, that you're going to give the opportunity to the people that have never had a chance. I've done that.
Yes, you have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. And with that, we're going to go and visit your dad's office. We are now entering your dad's office. Was there a time between these walls when he was regañándolo?
Telling you, son, you're wrong.
Well, yeah, actually.
Can you share a
yes,
story
yes.
on that?
Well, I mean, you know, one of the things, and now in retrospect, right?
Yes.
I remember we'd come into staff meetings and we would have, you know, the meetings and people would give their opinions and I would give my opinion. And my dad would say, no, and me, terco, you know, stubborn, and I would argue with him. And I remember people would look and we would argue, right? Because, you know, I thought I was right. You know, when you're young, you always think you're right. And you think that maybe your parents don't know everything. And so there was many times that we got into big arguments, right? And people were shocked. And I remember after some meetings, people would come in and, you shouldn't talk to your father like that. He's the president. And like, I don't care. If I think I'm right, I'm going to speak up. But, you know, the thing is that while he would scold me, right? I can remember him telling me, he says, you know, I appreciate you telling me what you think. He says, because I'm not always right. But he was right most of the time, right? But yeah, that was my dad. And the funny thing now is that with my kids, the same thing's happening.
Your pain.
They don't listen to their father.
Tell me, how was the transition from living in Delano to moving to La Paz?
When we moved to La Paz, I was a sophomore in high school. And by then, my older brothers and sisters had all moved out of the house. It was myself and my younger sister, Liz, and my brother, Anthony. And so we moved here. It was just a 2-bedroom. And so I actually had a room in the hospital with the other volunteers.
Okay.
But, you know, I would come home and eat and wash clothes here and stuff like that. But yeah, this is the house that my mom and dad lived in for the last my mother lived here until she passed away in 2016.
Wow. How this peaceful place, La Paz, shaped your leadership?
Well, you know, I think a couple of things, right? If you look at the house, it's really humble, right? People are amazed that a person like my father would live in a simple little house like that. But I think it talks about how we do our work and how we conduct ourselves, that you're humble. You never think that you're bigger than what you really are, right? And I think that that's a lesson that I learned from my father, and I think the house is an example of that. But then, you know, I look over here at Helen's garden. My father and my mother understood the importance of bringing people together and sharing a meal, right? People would come, workers would come from all over the state, and they would barbecue and host people and get a chance to talk to people. And so, you know, it speaks to me about the power of community.
So, Paul, we are in Delano now. Tell us about your childhood that you went through in Delano.
This is the house that we moved into shortly after we arrived in Delano in 1962. And this is where we stayed until the early 70s when we moved to La Paz. People were looking for my father's attention and advice, and people were coming from all over. And so, you know, he would come home, but there was always people coming to the house, and he was on the road a lot. And it was during that time that my dad, you know, because of the work that was there, he made a terrible sacrifice. He didn't go to our baseball games. He missed birthdays. He missed a lot of important social and personal events to do his work. And so at first it's kind of hard, you know, understanding, well, why isn't Dad here when all the other kids' parents are here at the baseball game? But as time went on, we began to see that it was important that he spend that time with folks. And as we got older, it made it easier to understand why he did that when we saw the results of his work.
Paul, we are at the 40 acres now. Would you take us to the room where your dad fasted for the first time back in 1968?
This is the place. It's a lot of history. It's a small room. You can see that it's pretty stark. But again, you know, this is my dad, right? He was humble. He rejected materialism. You can see it's not a luxurious place, but this was a place that he could pray. Now, what I do remember though was that I didn't understand why he stopped eating, but you know, you see your father who's big and strong in your eyes, right? Become weaker and weaker. And I remember we would come here and you could see he was in pain, and it would get to a point that after so many days of night eating, your senses become really heightened. And if you talk loud, it hurts the ears. Bright lights hurts the eyes. And so we had to be real quiet, and we'd come and visit him. But as that happened, people began to come from all over.
Did it cross through your mind that you were going to lose your dad?
Well, you know, I didn't really understand what was going on other than he, at that first one, other than he was getting weaker. Now, we'll go to the village where he fasted his last time, and that was for 36 days. And he was, you know, that was in 1988. He was an older man by then. And there I was really scared, because by then I was an adult. I had been working with him for, you know, for nearly 20 years, and I was worried about his health. But as kids, you don't really understand. You know that, you know, something's not right, but you don't maybe understand the impact of it. And so here we're outside of the Agbayani village. This is a place that has a lot of history for us. The movement always understood that the work had to be done at the workplace, but also in the community. You know, in 1965, when the grape strike started, it was Filipino farm workers that started it. So they had no place to go. So this is a place where the movement decided that we needed to do something about it. So we built 58 units for the retired Filipino farm worker, the Manong. You can see over here that we have the big building and the kind of the yellowish building. That was my father's second office. That was his office, and the Union Hall was there, and many important events happened there. But the biggest thing that happened was that in 1970, that's where the Delano grape growers came and signed the first collective bargaining agreements. Then next to it, in the tile building here, that's the Rodrigo Terrones Memorial Clinic. It was named after a striker that died on a picket line, just like this was named after a striker. And it's a tradition that we continue today with our housing communities. But at this clinic, back then there was no health care, very little primary health care for farm workers. And so this was a place where doctors and nurses came together with the community and provided high quality medical care for people. And the interesting thing is, it's amazing how many people I meet today that tell me that they were born there, or they remember when they broke their arm, they were there. And so yeah, it played an important role at that time. There was, it addressed the lack of quality medical care for farm workers and their families. But again, you know, this is another example of how the movement addresses the needs of people at the workplace and in the community.
Like the César Chávez Foundation today.
Exactly.
Housing, communication, education.
And working with our brothers in the UFW and UFW Foundation in Lupe. That's how we do the work.
Paul's story is not just about legacy. It is about living it with intention and purpose every day. Thank you, Paul, for letting us in. Now, we go from the fields of Delano to the streets of Boyle Heights, where another story of purpose began. This is Manuel Bernal.
Manuel, I love the LA office. This is a very nice office, and you have a full house today.
I do. Actually, we're pretty. It's pretty loaded. It's pretty busy today.
Let's talk a little bit about your 25 years. How the community vision has evolved through the 25 years of working here.
Yeah, you know, the way that it's evolved. Actually, for me personally, when I first came here 25 years ago, I actually came from a very small organization in Boyle Heights. And that was my vision of community, because that's where I grew up, right? So it was like very small, very concentrated, very dense, and that was my sense of community. Today, my sense of community is completely different, in a good way, right? It's like now it's the entire Southwest, right? And now it's low-income families that need a place to live, some educational support, all those things that the community needs. That's now I have now a larger sense of what the community really means to me.
As the new president, as the new leader, what
Yeah.
are you most proud of?
As I reflect back on the 25 years, right? I always go back to the beginning. And at the beginning, it was just like, a vision in Paul's eyes and Emilio's eyes about growing the organization in a way that would impact 25,000 families, right? It was just a vision. Today, we look back and see, we actually have a much bigger organization. We actually have programs throughout the Southwest. We're impacting tons and tons of people. So as I reflect back on those 25 years, I really come back to the fact that we have been able to envision a larger impact for ourselves, and at the same time follow that up with the structure and the staff to actually get us there.
Not having a big family in United States really gave you a vision of community.
I think the way that I think about it is that the fact that we didn't have all those cousins and aunts and uncles here, they were all over there, made us look into ourselves as a community, and then of course to the neighborhood around us as community.
Tell us how you guys arrived in this country.
It's a good story. Well, it must have been around 1972, 1973. And I think overall, it was my dad's next level up of creating a better life for the family. I remember sitting in our family living room, and it was dark, and all of us were there. My mom was there, and we're all sitting next to her, and my dad wasn't there. And it had been maybe a few days since we had seen him. And I asked my mom, I remember I'm asking my mom, hey mom, I'm like, where's my dad? And she said, I don't know. For a week, we didn't know his whereabouts. And that on the weekend, a distant cousin of my mom that lived here showed up unannounced and told my mom, hey, your husband, Gilberto, he came to the US, he wants you to come. So in a matter of a couple of days, right, we all four of us at that point, it was my sister Cynthia and my brother Carlos had arrived, and they were young, they were little, they were probably like 2 and 3 years old.
Wow.
So in a matter of a weekend, we were all four of us were dispersed to our families, to the extended family. So it must have been around March, because it was decided by the adults that my brother and I, Jesus, would stay in Tijuana, finish my first grade, his second grade, finish that school year, but my younger sister and brother were sent to Culiacan to live with my grandma and my grandpa and my grandma on my mom's side. During that period of time when we were in Tijuana, we actually slept in the closet of my dad's brother to finish off the school year. He was a newlywed, didn't have any kids, but they kind of helped us finish off the school year. Then after that, during the summer, Jesus and I went down to Culiacan and spent a year living with my grandparents. It may sound traumatic, but I look at it in a very kind of it was a wonderful time in my life, right? Yes, I was with my parents, but I was too young to really get it kind of in my head, right? So a year later, again, this must have been now like 73, 74, my dad and my mom brought us to LA, right? And it was again during the summer, and I remember the first day of being here in this country, I slept in the floor of our Winewood apartment. I remember my first in elementary school, right? And I went to Malabar Elementary School here in Boyle Heights, and I didn't know a word of English, right? That's natural. It was third grade, right?
Yes.
And I think Miss Torres was her name, and she was a very nice lady. She was trying to assess how much English I knew, and she asked me, like, what's your name? And I looked at her. She looked back at me and she knew that I didn't know what that meant. So she said, what's your name means, ¿cómo te llamas? I said, okay. So she asked me again, like, what's your name? And I said, me llamo Manuel. And then she said, where were you born? And I looked at her and then I started to cry because I didn't understand her, right?
How were those first few years living here in First Street as an immigrant?
Those years were like the formative transition years for us, right? Because I was still young. I remember coming to Belvedere Elementary School. That was my 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, really adjusting to this country, right? And it was, again, a lot of fond memories because of that. I had really good teachers. I think I look at that as a time when, yes, it was difficult at the very beginning because of the language, but at the same time, great to be with my parents and my siblings. I remember that, you take it within those 3 years, I ended up going from somebody that did not know a word of English to by the time that I graduated from elementary school, I was in the top group in terms of scholastic achievement.
Why do you think culture of education matters so much for our community?
Education is really the key to progressing, right? To breathe, the key to achieving your dreams, the key to breaking that cycle of poverty. All that lies fundamentally with education and attainment, right? It was both of them, right? But it was really my dad who, when I went into junior high, he started the system of rewarding and punishing us, right? In a parental way. So the reward was that every 10 weeks we get a report card, right? So he would pay us $5 for every A, $3 for every B, and then 0 for C's, and then we started paying him. We got D's, right? So that became pretty easy to figure out, right? Okay, there's no D's, there's no C's, and I really want to maximize my income at 13 years old. I had to get all those A's, right? So it started with my brother and myself, and we just produced the A's because we were going to get $25 at that point in time, right? And that's how it started, right? It was his way of motivating us, but it's also his way of punishing us if we didn't do well.
Yes.
And like I said, after a while, it just became second nature.
As we continue exploring Boyle Heights, is there a person or a place in this community that gives you or gave you a sense of belonging?
I don't think there's just one place. I actually think that there are many places in both kind of like physical spaces that we used to go to and just kind of visual places, right? I think what makes Boyle Heights, I joke around and say sometimes it's the center of the universe, right? Is that there is a kind of very vibrant community here. And you can also you can see it. It's more than just sensing it, right? You can actually see it. There's a lot of cultural pride in this community, and it made me feel like I was home. We are at Occidental College in Los Angeles, California. This is where I came to school.
So tell me how it felt to step into the campus of Occidental College, being an undocumented student.
Even thinking about it makes me kind of queasy, right? It was tough. I remember the first 2 years were extremely difficult. I felt like quitting many, many, many times. And it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just my undocumented status. It was the financial strain. It was a private school, and yes, I got a great financial package here, but I also had to assume the financial responsibility of my parents because they couldn't afford it. So I had to work 20 hours a week just to be able to pay my parents' portion. When I think about my own life, right, and people ask me, so why do you do what you do, right? And I've gotten, again, it's taken me 25 years to articulate this, but it's gotten me where I do it because I have this immigrant past, right, where my parents just sacrificed so much to get us here. And my father always said, you're blessed, right? And we brought you to this country, but you've done so much for yourself, but don't forget about the people that need that extra help, right? They're immigrants too, or they're struggling as well. So if you ever can help,
go ahead and do so. So my work in social justice is partly that, right? It's partly honoring my parents.
Thank you for what you do. We're very proud of the work that you have done.
Thank you.
And you continue doing, and the
Thank
legacy
you.
that you
Yeah.
continue building.
Y ahora, la voz detrás del poderoso movimiento de compartir historias. Recibamos con un fuerte aplauso a María Barquin. Acompañando a María, por favor, reciban con todo el cariño y admiración al hombre que lleva consigo el legado de la justicia, la esperanza y la perseverancia. Un líder que ha caminado con propósito y visión. Presidente emérito de la Fundación César Chávez, el señor Paul Chávez.
Hey baby, ¿qué pasó? No que yo era un vato. Hey baby, ¿qué pasó? No me dejes de ser moto. Come on baby, been kind.
Y ahora, desde las calles de Boyle Heights, liderando con el corazón y el alma, con el orgullo de sus raíces sinaloenses, recibamos con toda la energía y el respeto que se merece al actual presidente de la Fundación César Chávez, Manuel Bernal.
Buenos dias, good morning, welcome to our third day of the Staff Convocation for the César Chávez Foundation. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And wow, I'm humble, grateful to be in front of you guys, to be in the presence of two amazing, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Paul Chávez and Manuel Bernal, muchas gracias. Thank you for the trust. And I wanna, before we start la plática, the conversation, I would like to thank my team that put, those amazing videos together. Beto and Horacio, they did an amazing job. So thank you so much, you guys. Great job. I'm so proud of you guys. And also, Ildefonso and Franco, they're here supporting during the recording today. So thank you guys for your help. So to start our plática, señores, are you guys ready? Muy bien.
Yes.
Watch out. Vamos a hablar claro. We're going to talk very clearly today. Muy honestos, okay? Let's go back to how everything started, like how we saw in the video. And I'm going to start with you, Paul. Tell us how your childhood shaped the way you lead today.
Well, I think we're all products of our past, and I think that, with us, and when I say us, it's just not me, it's my brothers and sisters, my brother Anthony and Liz and all the other ones. We grew up in this environment where people were on the move and they were struggling for something and they were joined by people from all over. And so I think that from those early years, we learned that you had to join with other people to make progress. And so I think that was a big part of who we were. It was that environment that we raised in. It was during difficult times, but it was in unity that strength was found. So yeah, I think that's a big influence on us.
That's beautiful, Paul. Thank you for sharing. Manuel Bernal, are you ready?
I am ready. First, I'd like to say that was an awesome, voice of God introduction on us. It was just amazing. It was amazing. Thank you. On this specific topic, right? I've had 25 or 30 years, actually no, like 59 years or 60 years to reflect on this. And where I'm at today is that, I think I had a very different upbringing than Paul in the sense that he grew up in the movement and it was there right in front of you. And then it's not like his destiny was predetermined, but it was a very easy, identifiable, not an easy, but an identifiable path forward. For me, it was completely different, right? I didn't know when I first started my professional career what I was going to be doing, right? I did stumble upon this work, and over time, I like to say that I've been able to align my stars, just thinking about more in-depthly and more thoughtfully about what really is important to me. And it's taking me 30 years to figure it out, but it really came down to, as I said in the video, being able to articulate for myself, why I do what I do, right? And again, this first half is obviously honoring my parents and their commitment and their sacrifice to help people first with us and then everybody else. And the second part, of course, is that this country has received me so well, and I've been able to improve my life and my family. So it's a way of honoring both.
And definitely, Boy Heights built a lot of your character. We saw that, Manuel, and thank you for allowing us, for sharing your story in that video. So thank you so much. So we know you guys as leaders, but today we would like to know you guys more as the human being that you guys are. Oops, Dios mío, the tough questions. I'm gonna go with Paul. What are the most proud things that you remember, Paul, during the time that you were leading the César Chávez Foundation?
Is this on? Yeah. I think it's got to be seeing this thing grow. I remember, when my dad passed away. Before he passed away, we were good soldiers, and he would tell us what to do, and we would work hard, and we would do it. And after he passed away, that burden, shifted to us, and so you think back about what did he say and what would he want to do. And one thing I remember him saying was that it'd be a terrible waste of a lot of sacrifice by good people if his work ended with his life. And so I remember thinking, okay, this has got to keep going. This has got to keep going. And I think that after all these years of working, to see that it's grown and it's bigger than what he thought. When my dad was around, we had 258 units of housing, and now I think we're closing in on 5,000, right? We have one radio station, and now it's 9, but now we have all this production, and there was no education program, and La Paz was the place we lived, but it wasn't a national center, and so things have changed a lot, and so I think it's seeing that his work continues and it grows. And I think that's the biggest satisfaction. And then beyond that is working with the people that we work with.
Thank you, Paul. And Manuel, tell everybody, not me, tell everybody. It's hard because I'm not used to the audience, having an audience in a conversation. Tell us how a moment that you had to make a decision, a hard decision, and how it built or shaped your character there. One of the times that you had to make a very tough decision, and how did it really change your character?
I can't think of a specific occasion, but certainly the toughest decisions I get to make, and I make them, are when things are not going well, and it becomes obvious that if I don't do something, then it's going to keep on not going well. It's going to get worse. And at some point in time, not too long after I find out about this, it becomes a reflection on me, on my own leadership. And naturally, I try to avoid conflict as much as possible, but that's what really triggers me to get over that concern or that hurdle and make those tough decisions. And most of those decisions have been about personnel. And that is because you bring folks into this family and you want to support them when we do as best as we can, and we guide them and provide the training, but sometimes it just doesn't work out, right? And there have been a few instances throughout the last 25 years where I've had to make that call. It's tough. It's probably the toughest decisions you've made. I know, Paul, you made them in the past, right? That's really hard. Don't wish it upon anybody, but it is probably the toughest one.
Thank you, Manuel. I can imagine. So you guys, both of you guys, have mentored so many people. I'm an example of that. When do you decide to talk, and when do you decide to really listen? What makes that decision? How you do it?
I've been accused of not being a good listener, right? But, you know, I think as you get older, you become wiser and you begin to listen more. And so I think when I was younger, I probably should have listened more. But as you're around people and you start learning, you know, then you understand that you don't know everything in the world. I remember with the radio station, right? When we were there trying to figure out the format, right? And the whole question was, you know, we were operating with educational stations, and we were there trying like, well, how do we deal with revenue issues, and how do we get involved in partisan politics, right? And I remember some of the volunteers saying, well, if we have a commercial frequency, you know, don't we decide what we put on the air? And I said, well, yeah, we do, but we're not going to do commercial stations, right? And then very gently they said, but if we did, couldn't we keep the same programming that we have on the educational stations? And well, yeah. But wouldn't we have the ability then to sell advertising and do partisan work? And I said, yeah. And then se me prendió el foco. Okay. And so that's a good example of if you listen, you can find the right answers. And so yeah, I think that as you get older, and for me anyways, I had it gave me the confidence to listen. Sometimes when you're young, you think you know it all, and you think you have to have all the answers. As you get older, you realize that okay, maybe I don't, and then you start looking for answers.
Thank you for that advice, Manuel. If you had the opportunity to share an advice to one of the staff members that is barely starting their leadership journey, their career, what advice will you give them?
Coming into this organization, I tell people we're a little quirky, right? We're not a nonprofit as your typical nonprofit. We're not a for-profit. We're someplace in the middle, right? And because of that, it takes a bit of time to actually understand the way that we function. So the first piece of advice is just do the job. Just do whatever you're being assigned to do. Just do it, right? We know that you have more potential than we hired you for, but we'll get there. Have the patience, right? Opportunities will come. We are a growing organization. People sometimes, unfortunately, leave. There will be an opportunity for you. But for now, just do your work. And I kid around. I have this 2-year rule. People know what that 2-year rule is, right? The rule is that you do your job for 2 years, and then after that, you can transfer anywhere that you can or you want, right? So that's my first advice. But I think very similar to Paul, beyond that is just this kind of, deep, almost endless belief in people, right? Knowing that the person that walked in the door today could be the next president, right? And we believe that. And the issue is now, how do you create for yourself, and how do we help you create a path forward within the organization? That's kind of the magic of CCF. And yesterday we were at the after your tours. We were kind of buying a little bit of time, and we asked you to sit down on those stairs. And group by group, Paul kind of talked about his dad. And at the end, I asked people to raise their hands if they had come in at one position and then over time been given an opportunity to rise up to another one. Or if they were initially hired when you probably knew you didn't quite qualify, but the organization gave you the chance. And I'd like to repeat that exercise. Can you please raise your hand if you were one of those? Raise your hand if you were given an opportunity. That's me too, right? So it's 50% of you at least, right? And I think that's who we are. That's who we are, and I think that's what I think about when I think about the staff. That's what I think about. Not what you're doing today, but what you're going to be, what your potential is to help this organization in the future.
Well, thank you for trusting, giving the trust on us, and allowing us to grow as an organization, and as a group of people we're here because we believe on the mission and what we do every day. So on that, our theme today, or our convention, is help us love even those who hate us so we can change the world. So Paul, how do you lead with love when things are they're not doing good?
That phrase, I think, is directed at how you deal with your adversaries, right? Because I think the assumption is that you love the ones that you work with, right? Because you share those values. But it's I know that it's a tough concept to believe. But I think it goes back to this idea that when my dad and them began their work, they were fighting for respect. Right? They wanted growers, employers to look at farm workers and respect them as human beings. And then they knew that once they had that respect, then they would give them better wages and conditions and those things that respect demands. And so like when there was, in the early days when things weren't going so well and there's some talk about maybe resorting to violence and burning some packing sheds and busting some heads and things like that, my dad rejected it because he understood that while violence might bring you some short-term gains and it might bring growers to the bargaining table, he knew that it would never earn respect. And at the end of the day, that's what we wanted, right? Once you're treated with respect, then all of those benefits that come along with respect are given to you. And so I think that from a tactical point of view, I think it makes a lot of sense when you understand the deeper meaning of your struggle. And so, violence will never bring respect. And if you love your adversaries, right, then maybe grudgingly they'll respect you.
Wow, that takes a lot of courage, huh? Manuel, in regards of forgiveness, tell us a little bit about forgiveness, how that plays in leadership.
I'm glad Manuel's got the tough questions.
Well, no, I was going to answer yours. So let me start with yours and I'll go on to mine, right? I think they are related, right? And when I think about loving even those who hate us, I don't have the framework that Paul does in terms of the history and the growers who were fighting at that time. In my head, what pops up is both hate and love are emotional reactions. It's at different levels. It happens almost every day because people come to me with issues every day, right? And those issues are burning for that specific person that brought it to me, and I need to deal with it. I need to do this, I need to do that, and I have to reflect. Okay, is that something that is really that serious that is going to dramatically tank the organization, or is it just something that's really specific to this moment, and we need to kind of get over or forgive the transgression or the lack of being effective, and then just going to take a step back and reapproach the problem a different way. So I think back to forgiveness, I think it's not so much forgiveness as it is just being patient and being analytical about what we're confronting, and then finding different ways to move forward.
Yes,
and not hold any hard feelings along the way.
That's true. And Julie shared that story yesterday when that lady told her, I wish he dies. And the way, you transform and don't let those things affect you, it's amazing. Tell us, Paul, what do you do when you're not working? Well, you're retired, so you don't have that anymore. But I know you keep yourself very busy. But what do you do? What is your hobby? What do you enjoy? ¿Por qué se ríe?
When do I get to answer a question for Paul? Well, not this one. Not this one. Maybe next one. Go ahead.
I'm going to disappoint people, but no, right now I enjoy just taking my time, right? Like I'll do some speaking events for the National Chavez Center, and before I would go and I would do it and I would get back and for work. Now I'll go like a day before and then I do the event and I take my time and come back. And so, I'm enjoying things a little bit more in vez de andar de carreras. And then, I've been telling people that what I really enjoy, I enjoy getting up in the morning without prisa, without pendientes, and making my cup of coffee and pan tostado and looking at what's happening in the news. But that's how I start my days. But the thing is that there's the thing is that there's still work to be done, and so I make sure that that they know that I'm available, but also that I'm not getting in the way of operations. And I think I've done a good job with that. But then also I have a granddaughter, Penelope, that consumes
We all
a lot.
know Penelope, Paul.
Who
You
consumes
have
a lot
made
of my
that clear.
time, and and so I have my car seat permanently positioned in my car so that at a moment's notice I can take her to In-N-Out or get an ice cream.
Manuel, same
ma'am.
question because you're gonna get offended if I don't ask you the
No,
same
no,
question.
no, not at all, Maria.
Now you notice I didn't say that smoking a cigar
Oh,
and
yeah,
having,
you
having
just
a tequila, right?
I think you're covering, you're not being, it's not Hablando Claro, Paul. I think, you're asking me like what I do for fun. Is that the question?
Yes, mister.
As you can probably imagine, my days and most of my weekends are pretty tight, right? It is, if I don't carve out an hour for myself in the very, very morning, then I don't have any more time for myself. So, but I do have fun, right? And that I think comes in two categories within the scope of my work, right? Luckily, I am blessed with having a really, really top-notch, top management team. Shout out to all of you guys and girls. But so, which means that I shouldn't get involved in operations, that much, right? It's really, I need to be with them, and it's been a disciplined approach to trying to get there. So, but the fun part of it is that, I get to have this really a kind of a global view of the organization. A lot of it internally, of course, and externally. And the fun part of that is, you know what, Martin, I just met this
I
community
have this
services
crazy
person.
idea.
No, that's the second one. No, but is about grooming and leadership, right? Martin, I just met this person at community services. She's top notch. I think she could be X, Y, and Z, right? She could be the next assistant manager. Or I come back and tell Martin and Santa, they get all pissed off at me. Hey, I just met Julie. She's the assistant manager at the bar. I think she could be the next manager because Lorraine is being promoted. So of course they get all upset at me because I shouldn't get involved in operations. But that's the fun part, right? Is seeing and meeting all of you and then coming up with how do we move you guys up?
I thought the fun part was aggravating people. It
Oh,
sounds like
okay, see, total opposites. But again, that's part number one, right? I think that's fun part number one. And part number two is what you said, is I do a lot of traveling and I come back with crazy ideas. I must be on crazy idea number 3,529 at this point. And as I tell people, 50% of them are no good, right? The other 40% may be good, but I rely on my top management team to tell me yes and no, right? And they're not good, that's okay. But 10 of them, I know they're really good, right? So I think coming up with these ideas is actually part of the fun.
That's good. Thank you, Manuel. Yes, you have amazing ideas. To finish our conversation, we understand that we represent a very humble brand. How do you guys keep grounded, humble? How do you do that? And you talk about it, Paul, when we went to your parents' house, the humbleness of the house. How do we stay humble? How you guys stay humble, being a president of a huge organization?
invariably it goes back to like learned experiences, right? But the example that I saw by my mom and dad, for me, were a clear way of how you're supposed to live your life, right? And so I think that was part of it. And then I can remember my mom always saying, he thinks he's too big for his britches, and that meant cálmate, don't get ahead of yourself, right? My dad had some rules. He had 3 rules, and one of them was never take yourself too serious. And those are all, they're all calls to be humble and to not have your head get too big, right? And so I think it's those reminders that play a big role. But the other part is just the people you serve and the people you work with, right? When you see them and you're inspired by their work, it does. You realize that that as we sat there and we developed plans, they were just ideas on paper. But they took life when you had hardworking people that would go to work every day and do their part and make them become a reality. And then when you see that, then you have a true appreciation for everyday people, right? And I think that that's a humbling experience, because you know that as big as your plans are, they're nothing if you don't have a good, dedicated staff to implement it.
Thank you, Paul. That was amazing. I would echo that sentiment, right? For me, it's keeping front and center the people that we serve. Right? That's ultimately why we're all here. That's why I'm here. It's really, the organization is not about me. It's about the impact that this organization wants, it needs to have. That impact, we've thought about it. We've been really thoughtful about how we do it. We developed these strategic plans through the help of Paul and the board. And so we know what we need to do. We know what the need is. It's really about that implementing, right? So yes, it's about keeping the folks that we want to impact and the lives we want to change, and finding different ways of doing that every day. And of course, then we cannot have that change without all of you. Keeping those two things front and center, the folks that we want to impact, and the fact that we can't do anything, they have these really wonderful plans, without the work of all of you. And I think if I keep those two things in mind, I know where my place is, right?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Paul. And with that, I want to say thank you for your trust and your time. We had so much fun. Thank you, Celia, for your trust as well, because this was a crazy idea of yours. So thank you so much. And again, on behalf of the César Chávez staff, we thank you guys for giving us for supporting us with leadership and your guidance every time, every operational planning, any strategic planning. Thank you so much for your support and trust. Gracias. Esto fue Hablando Claro y con esto terminamos.